Hello and welcome to State of the Economy. Today we are here to discuss something which a lot of newspapers and television channels have been talking about in the last 2 weeks, marking 25 years of economic reforms in India. 1991 was the watershed year when India opened up its economy to global investment, global trade. Trade was delicensed, industry was delicensed, and a whole lot of framework, policy framework announcements, new policy frameworks were introduced, whether it's for the stock markets, whether it's for GDRs, foreign capital coming into the country, even for the debt market, interest rates, liberalization, etc. To discuss all that and the way economic reforms have evolved over the last 25 years, because reforms have not been the same. They have assumed a life of their own. They have moved in various trajectories over the last 25 years through different regimes, although broadly moved forward. But to discuss all that, we have with us Sanjaya Baru, Dr. Sanjaya Baru, who's seen economic reforms first as a journalist, working for the Economic Times during Narasimha Rao's period, interacted with Prime Minister Narasimha Rao pretty closely, and later worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh as his media advisor in UPA 1, wrote a book called The Accidental Prime Minister, one of the best-selling books in the non-fiction category, which also in some ways speak about reforms during the UPA period, which was a carry forward of reforms done in the previous UPA regime as well as the United Front regime. So welcome to our show, Dr. Sanjaya Baru. So we thought, since you've seen it from such close quarters during Narasimha Rao's time, and subsequently as a journalist, as an author, as somebody who worked in the government. So how do you see 25 years of economic reforms in perspective today? What's your rear view mirror perspective?
Well, I think the most important takeaway when I think back about 1990-91 is the role that political leadership played. Yeah. You know, a lot of the media attention recently, you refer to that, has been on what the economists said and did. Yeah. And you know, I also belong to the tribe of economists. And we economists like to think of ourselves as the modern day saviors. You know, whenever there's a problem, the economists are supposed to be solving the problem.
Yeah. Manmohan Singh used to quote Keynes to say something about economists.
You see, actually there's a autobiography of Keynes in which the chapter dealing with the crisis years of the interwar period is titled The Economist as Savior. The economists have always liked to see themselves as saviors. Of all the social scientists, they are the ones who've been in government and have got cushy jobs in government, unlike political scientists and historians and sociologists. But the fact is, 1990-91 was about political leadership. It was about what Chandrasekhar did as Prime Minister in the first half. You know, Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister only on June 21st. For the first 6 months of the year, the Prime Minister was Chandrasekhar. Again, someone who doesn't get enough credit. So when I look back after 25 years, I think we need to pay adequate tribute to the political leadership of that time.
Yeah, in fact, I forgot to tell the viewers that you've just finished your first draft on 1991 reforms, and we're hoping that the book will be out in a few months. And you told me that, which is not such a well-known fact, that the reforms that Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh implemented, the blueprint was there already in the Chandrasekhar government's.
That's right.
First budget, which could not be presented by Yashwant Sinha, right?
That's right. In fact, Chandrasekhar
so Yashwant Sinha remains a highly underappreciated finance minister.
Absolutely. In fact, it is Yashwant Chandrasekhar, Prime Minister Chandrasekhar, who took the initiative in December 90 to send his officials to Washington to negotiate a loan with the IMF.
Yeah.
Finance Minister was Mr. Sinha. They negotiated a loan. The first installment of that loan was paid in January. And the understanding was that when the budget is presented in February, the second installment would be given.
Yeah.
And once that IMF loan would come, then the balance of payments crisis, which happened in May, June, the selling of the gold, which happened in March, Chandrasekhar had to mortgage Indian gold, physically carry it to London and all that. All that would not have happened if he had got the IMF loan. But the reason we didn't get the IMF loan was because Rajiv Gandhi decided to withdraw support.
The government fell.
The government fell. Chandrasekhar was not in a, Yashwant Sinha was not in a position to present his budget. But his budget speech was ready. The budget documents were ready. The economic survey was ready. And a lot of what the Manmohan Singh Finance Ministry did in June 91 was really take this forward.
You used to meet Narasimha Rao those days as one of the edit writers for Economic Times, or and even Manmohan Singh. So, did you sort of, did they privately ever acknowledge the fact that the framework was already ready?
I think Dr. Singh may well have. I mean, I don't think he would have denied. I can't recollect whether I asked them. But, we did not know.
Yeah.
See, it's only much later that many of us in the media knew what had happened. But we were not aware how much forward the Chandrasekhar government had moved in terms of the reform process.
So basically all the delicensing of industry, opening of trade.
That is the different thing. You see, the main thing about crisis management was reducing the fiscal deficit and trade reform, which happened in July. The delicensing,
and the depreciation of the rupee,
devaluation of the rupee.
Devaluation of the rupee.
But devaluation again, I think, was very much a decision of Dr. Manmohan Singh, Rangarajan, and after the Narasimha Rao. I don't think the Chandrasekhar government was actually at that time contemplating devaluation. But
so you're saying that some basic framework was there, but
exactly.
But Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh really fleshed it out, took it
totally.
way forward.
That is true. Both the trade policy reform and the industrial policy reform were Narasimha Rao's initiatives. In fact, Narasimha Rao calls Dr. Manmohan Singh. If you read, Jairam Ramesh's book on the 1991, Jairam Ramesh mentions the fact that the Prime Minister called the Finance Minister and said, I want a trade policy reform done by this evening. On July 4th morning, he calls him. So Manmohan Singh then tells Chidambaram that, the Prime Minister wants it done, and Chidambaram says, we can't do it in a day. So Dr. Manmohan Singh then tells him, look, by 5 o'clock, we need to issue the orders. And it's done. Right? In one day, they undertook major trade policy reform. So those were all Narasimha Rao's initiatives. Similarly, industrial decontrol, delicensing, July 24th, which was announced, in fact, by Mr. P.J. Kurian, who is now, Deputy Chairman of the Rajya Sabha. He was then the Minister of State for Industries. And the Minister for Industries was Narasimha Rao. And those announcements were made by the Minister for Industries, not by the Finance Minister. So I think there was a lot of dramatic kind of turn of events in those 2-3 weeks.
Okay. And do you think politically it was sold properly at that time? Because there is one view that a lot of reforms in India tend to happen by stealth. But the initial reforms which were announced by Narasimha Rao and Manmohan Singh had to be sold politically. So I think Jairam Ramesh's book also suggests that the political packaging was that when you delicense industry, you say that this is a continuation of the Nehruvian, Indira Gandhi and now this policy. So they didn't want to make it seem as though the old industrial development framework was being jettisoned.
That's right, because actually
being substituted by a new one,
No, because
in effect it was a new one though.
The opposition was not coming from the real opposition. Opposition to what Narasimha Rao was doing was coming from within, from people like Arjun Singh, A.K. Antony, Vailar Ravi, what they regarded as a kind of left of center.
Although BJP and left also had their own
they were
issues.
irrelevant. BJP supported Narasimha Rao, but the left was not that significant in Parliament.
You're right, because he had only 231 seats.
Narasimha Rao had 232
Yeah,
seats.
he-
But
he-
his
he-
worry
he-
was
he
not
needed-
about the
yeah,
left.
okay.
His worry was not about the left. His worry was his own party. And that is why he kept saying that he was quoting Nehru all the time. He used Jawaharlal Nehru to defend his undoing of a lot of things that not Nehru but Indira Gandhi did. Actually, the licensing policy was not introduced by Jawaharlal Nehru. Many of the controls on industry, including the MRTP Act, etc., were all brought in by Indira Gandhi, in the late 60s and early 70s. So the rolling back that Narasimha Rao was doing was not rolling back of Nehruvian economics. It was a rolling back of Indira
Gandhi
radicalism.
controls during Indira Gandhi's
her early phase. And so he could quote Nehru, and Nehru believed in private enterprise. Nehru was very much a kind of middle of the road guy. And so he was constantly quoting Nehru to undo all of this. But the fact is that on 21st June, when Narasimha Rao became Prime Minister, he drafted a speech that he delivered on Doordarshan. On 22nd evening, he addressed the nation. And if you read that speech, it's very clear. He's telling India, we are in a crisis and the world is changing. It's not just that we are in a crisis. He draws attention to the collapse of the Soviet Union. The old ways of doing things are no longer going to work. So the world is changing, we are in a crisis, we need to also change. That was his message.
Sure. And you're right, in a way, global growth during that period, if you see the 90s and those 10 years, world economy did grow at a robust, reasonably good pace, and India was part of that, the larger, even Chinese economy was growing well at that time. But then this debate, Sanjay, was always, never went away in a sense, even when through the 90s, whether reforms were sold to the people politically enough, because there's always this debate which was there then, which is there today, in fact more intense in some ways today, because the world has changed again. Today, globally there's a move towards greater welfareism, wages are stagnating around the world. So the debate about whether economic reforms or market-led reforms, whether they led to enough redistribution of wealth, or the trickle-down theory, as they used to call it, whether it worked enough. And at some stage, you would agree, when you worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh in UPA 1, there was a recognition that the trickle-down theory had not worked as much as envisaged in the first place. So a lot more had to be done to redistribute wealth. Is that a fair assessment?
Well, first of all, Narasimha Rao did not believe in the trickle-down theory.
Okay.
Narasimha Rao, in fact, walked on two legs. One was of decontrol, delicensing, opening up the economy, etc., which was all favoring the kind of market economics. But the other was to, in fact, increase spending on public's welfare, on employment guarantee. In fact, he introduced the Food for Work program, and the book that recently Vinay Sitapati has written, the autobiography, documents.
Where you've also
very well.
have a lot of inputs there.
Very well documented how the original author of NREGA, of the MP Lads program, various programs meant to take money to the village level, were the initiatives that Narasimha Rao took. He had with him people like K Venugopal and Yugandhar and a lot of left of center IAS officers who were passionate about some of these initiatives. So therefore, Narasimha Rao did not believe in trickle-down theory. I mean, that was a kind of view of the people like Monte Ahluwalia,
the technocrats,
the right-wing
economists
in the government. And it's true that as a result of, when we look back last 25 years, the impact of reforms has been to widen the base of Indian development. Regions of the country which were not developed in 1990.
So the state is really reaching out to a lot more population.
Yeah, it has widened. Look, let's face it, in 1990, industrial development was confined to Gujarat, Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu, maybe a little bit around Delhi. That's it, and some pockets in Bengal. Today, you see there's a much more wider distribution of the industrial sector, of the services sector. So in regional terms, the growth process has been much more dispersed.
And this has been also facilitated by massive road networks which got built throughout,
and
which accelerated during Vajpayee's time. But
that's right. And the second thing that has happened is that poverty has gone down in terms of a percentage of population below poverty line, etc. Poverty has reduced. What has not happened, or rather what has happened, is inequalities have also grown. Therefore, it's this rise in inequality, both in terms of regional inequality as well as interpersonal inequality, which is a social concern. And I think every government has recognized that. Now, you asked the question, were reforms not sold politically? I think,
this is a problem which every regime has been
how do you sell something which is meant to increase investment unless you can prove that it has also increased employment? I mean, I think the big problem in India is that the manufacturing sector employment has not grown as much. Right? And in the
manufacturing sector itself has not grown.
Has not grown as much.
Right? It's just 16% of GDP.
Exactly.
It's a contribution to GDP.
So in Western democracies, if you look at politicians when they speak, they're constantly talking about increasing jobs. Jobs is the key kind of political messaging that happens in Western democracies. In our democracy, the focus is much more on inflation than on jobs. The political mobilization is on inflation and much less on employment.
Like if you see Prime Minister Narendra Modi, in many ways he also keeps paying tribute to Narasimha Rao. In the sense, he keeps going back to Narasimha Rao. If anything, the BJP probably today celebrates Narasimha Rao more than the Congress does. And Mr. Modi also, in some ways, is also struggling with the language, the political language. He came in and he started by saying that Sarkari Khazana Garibon ke liye hai. So he began with the language of welfareism, which is true for all previous prime ministers, because you have to talk, welfare in a country where 90% of the people live on a consumption expenditure as per NSS of less than 100 rupees a day, right? So at the same time, Mr. Modi is also carrying forward the reforms process in a kind of incremental way, because all the low-hanging fruits have been taken by the previous regimes, by the Narasimha Rao, by Vajpayee, in between, the United Front for a brief while. So how do you see this process moving forward? What are the things that need to be done? Because Mr. Jaitley, Finance Minister Jaitley also keeps saying that the big bang period is over. And it's, as it happens, big bang gets a lot of publicity, right?
It's not about publicity, it's about how people perceive, which is very important. I think what people want today is a more transparent government. I think the one slogan of Mr. Modi, that maximum governance, minimum government, that's a slogan waiting to be implemented. In real terms, we are still living in a country in which there is a much more intrusive government. Doing business in India is still not as easy as doing business in many other countries.
Improving though.
The reform of administration, reform of government, from the village level upwards. This is the next phase of reform. I mean, you can do big bang stuff there also, and we don't have time today to go into that. But you can certainly do incremental reform there. You talked about, Narasimha Rao and not being celebrated. But I must add here that the Congress party not just did not celebrate Narasimha Rao, they forgot Narasimha Rao. They did not even give him a Bharat Ratna while they gave it to M.G. Ramachandran. I wish this government actually honors Mr. Narasimha Rao. But there's a lot that the Prime Minister can learn from what Narasimha Rao did in 91, which is, you focus on one or two objectives. The success of Narasimha Rao initially, which in some ways got dissipated in his
He got the hierarchy of objectives right.
Exactly. He realized that he had three goals. Goal number one was to stabilize his government. Goal number two was to stabilize the economy. And
foreign policy.
Goal number three was foreign policy, to stabilize India globally. He achieved all three.
All three,
So you have to set your goal And I think the goal of minimum government, maximum governance is a very good goal. But I think we need to move in that direction.
You know, Sanjay, you worked with Dr. Manmohan Singh as Prime Minister, as media advisor, and you watched the UPA one very closely. UPA one did quite well in terms of, it had a huge, it got India a very good economic growth rate, which went on for about 6-7 years. It's only the last 3 years that UPA 2, there was a collapse of growth, which is partly linked to global conditions also. Now, in this period, Dr. Manmohan Singh also used to talk a lot about what you just said, administrative reforms, you know, and they used to keep pulling out those Administrative Reforms Commission reports, Moily report. Every once in a while, they would be pulled out for recommendations. But where do you think the roadblocks came? I mean, why couldn't administrative reforms, some of the key ones, be implemented? Number one, and number two, Dr. Manmohan Singh also kept talking about the need for a second green revolution. I remember some of the speeches that you used to write. Frequently, this theme used to appear in a lot of his public speaking. That second green revolution, second green agriculture. Now, today we are seeing how agriculture is suffering. So, do you think we are missing out on those on these two aspects?
Absolutely. I mean, I think second green revolution was a slogan that actually Dr. Manmohan Singh coined. But I think the initiatives he was able to take, or he did take in agriculture, were limited. I mean, the agriculture is a highly complex area, and there's no one formula for the rest.
You're right. He used to talk a lot about it, but the states, I don't know whether he could get the
for
states
example,
together.
just to give you one example, he would always say that the most important administrative innovation that India had made in agriculture was the system of extension services. You know, these extension services played an extremely important role in promoting agricultural productivity in the 50s, 60s, 70s. And that completely collapsed. But that is what state governments have to put in place, and I don't think the centre succeeded in getting states to pay attention to rural extension services, farm extension services. Similarly, agricultural marketing reform. A lot was said, but very little done. Administrative reform, you know, that's the missing link. That's
in fact, in both these, this involvement of states is paramount. It's very critical, right?
Very critical, but you know, the centre can do much more on administrative reform, provided the
in a sense, this is the real big reform that is needed.
That's
now.
right. I mean, but
you could call it a big bang.
You need a political leadership that understands what needs to be done and has the instruments in hand, like the civil service leadership. Unfortunately, the civil service leadership today is in fact regressing. You know? There's a growing bureaucratization of governance in this country. You know, interference in all kinds of things, in the way in which universities are run, in the way in which NGOs are run, in the way in which think tanks are run. You know, excessive bureaucratization is actually now, you know, reversing the process rather than opening up the country. People who say China is a country with a closed mindset, with a closed economy with an open mindset. We are a country with an
open economy with a closed mindset.
Open economy and a closed mindset.
So what emerges from what you just said is that de-bureaucratization could be the next big bang reform. Although it doesn't happen in a big bang, but that's the way they go.
The quote on China was closed society with an open mindset. We are an open society with a closed mindset.
Okay. Anyway, thank you very much for talking to us, Dr. Sanjaya Baru. That's all in this edition, and we'll be back with you next week. Thanks for watching.